From the 11 Alive studios, this is The Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Good Sunday morning, good Easter morning, a Sunday morning and possibly a restful one for state lawmakers after not a lot of rest earlier this week, wrapping up the 2026 legislative session.
That's right, because Thursday night turned into an early Friday morning at the state capitol. Adjournment came shortly after 1 a.m.
The ayes clearly have it. Sunny down.
Yeah, you see that gavel there, the papers going up in the air, the familiar cry of sine die. It was a session that began in January and lasted until April, a total of 40 days in this legislative session. So let's talk about what passed and what did not. One of the bills heading to Governor Brian Kemp's desk is a bill that features a formula to cut local property taxes, but it involved a frenzied finish Thursday night under the Gold Dome. Let's begin with that amendment to Senate Bill 33, a scaled-back version of property tax relief. Well, this version, it does not include a 3% cap on the growth of school and local government property tax levies, but it does still allow local schools and governments to use sales tax to pay for property tax relief for homeowners. There was some horse trading inside the Capitol to get it to the final vote, and not everyone was happy with this. Doug Richards with the 11 Alive political team was there for the whole thing.
Saying property taxes on homes are too high, Georgia lawmakers made it a priority before adjournment to cut them. Their property tax measures took several forms, one of which failed in the Senate late Thursday evening. But within an hour, the measure revived, passing the Senate and then passing the House after midnight Friday.
And we're going to do what's best for the taxpayer.
Speaker John Burns let the Senate bill get House approval despite flaws he described afterwards.
There were several different initiatives we had in our property tax bill that would have been more meaningful for our property taxpayers.
The bill passed despite alarms sounded by local officials whose governments and school systems depend on property tax revenue for funding and who warned that the measures could wreak havoc on their budgets.
We understood that they have a need to have enough revenue to take care of their essential needs, just as we do in the state. And so we were respectful of that.
Burns says the House property tax bill that failed in the Senate would have given local governments better protection. Governor Kemp will decide whether to sign the one that passed. Doug Richards, 11 Alive News.
So that property tax discussion, it was one of many on the final day of the 2026 legislative session. So let's start going through it, and let us start with what passed. The main job of the House and the Senate is to approve a budget. It is the only thing they've got to do under Georgia law, and they did it. The $38.5 billion plan for the 2027 fiscal year that leaders admit is a compromise. The highlight is $70 million for school-based literacy coaches, a priority for Republican House Speaker John Burns. There's also a state income tax bill which would reduce the state rate to a little less than 5% this year, all the way to less than 4% within 8 years, as long as the state hits certain financial benchmarks. And the Dreams Scholarship is a companion to the Hope Scholarship that includes raising the contribution limit to education savings plans. Some things, though, did not happen. So let's start with elections. Lawmakers failed to meet a self-imposed deadline to eliminate QR codes on ballots, even though a state law says they have to do that by July. This could lead to a special session to solve it, or it could be settled in court. Legislators did also not take action to tackle the growth of data centers, and Georgia will not be moving to the Atlantic time zone for a few months each year, which was proposed earlier in the session. Last night, during our live streaming coverage of the session on 11 Alive Plus, I asked Senate Minority Leader, Democrat Harold Jones II, what his party, the Minority Party, can take away from this session.
Our profile has gone up. I think that's another big area that we want to concentrate on, actually getting our message out there. I think we've done a great job at doing that, and also fighting where the fight was there, but at the same time trying to actually help pass legislation. I think we did that too. So I give us really a solid A+, quite frankly. The things that we wanted to do, we wanted to actually establish a narrative. I think we did that.
Governor Brian Kemp has 40 days to sign or veto legislation that made its way to his desk. This was the final legislative session, barring a special session for the governor. The Republican is term limited, and when lawmakers convene in 2027, Georgia will have a new chief executive. Governor Kemp spoke to legislators Thursday night. Here is part of what he said inside the House chamber.
In the years to come, I hope we can all look back on this time as an era when Georgia leaders put the people first, when they made their lives a little easier and opportunities more plentiful, when state leaders worked as a team and did the right thing, even when no one was watching. But most of all, I hope you'll continue to put hard-working Georgians first.
It was a busy final day and a busy session overall. You can catch up with all of our coverage right now. Check out the 11 Alive Politics page on 11alive.com, and you can rewatch our full Sine Die live streaming coverage right now on 11 Alive Plus. If you have yet to download 11 Alive Plus, now is a perfect time to do it, as we are still rolling right along in this very busy politics year.
And now it's time for our Politics Roundtable. Today we have Democratic strategist Fred Hicks, the founder and president of the Hicks Evaluation Group, which has worked with hundreds of political campaigns for nearly 20 years. Republican strategist Joshua Edmonds, vice president of the Stone Ridge Group. He was the executive director for the Georgia Life Alliance from 2018 to 2022, where he authored the first draft of Georgia's heartbeat bill. And from the AJC, chief politics reporter Greg Bluestein, also an author and contributor to MS Now, all returning panelists. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here with us. Greg, I want to start things off with you. We saw a piece of legislation. I want to start with that literacy law that was really unanimous after a little bit of back and forth. House Speaker John Burns' top priority. Can you talk about that for us?
Yeah, about a week ago, we thought this might be the big sticking point of the legislative session, because this was House Speaker John Burns' top priority. It is a vast overhaul of how we teach phonics and literacy in Georgia. Would put a literacy coach in all Georgia K through third grade schools, aiming to boost that third grade literacy level that is just lagging far behind, too far behind in the estimation of policy leaders. And the Senate had its own competing measure, but they ended up basically conceding to the House version. Huge breakthrough that really cooled at least some of the temperatures going into the final day of the session.
Yeah. And that's a good segue, because there was still plenty of tension, particularly in the closing hours last night. Joshua, there were two competing tax priorities. The House was really keen on reducing property taxes. The Senate was more keen on reducing income taxes. That income tax proposal moved pretty cleanly through both chambers. Property taxes really hit the skids over in the Senate for a brief period there around midnight. What happened, and then what was the compromise that got some form of that bill over the line towards the end?
You know, it's crazy how many top priorities became the most contentious issue of the last hour of the session. And, you know, this is where campaign priorities and policy priorities come to a head and clash in the final moments of session. You know, there was always going to be this conflict between property tax versus income tax, and it really comes down to who benefits most in the campaign season for what passes. And all the while, homeowners and taxpayers are in the middle hoping something gets done that makes a difference. No one seems to be happy with the outcome, though.
And there is some math backstopping all of this, too. Georgia has to pass, which means the Georgia legislature has to pass a balanced budget. And Fred, for Democrats, there was pushback to some of these income and property tax proposals, or at least some elements of them throughout the session, right?
Yes, for sure, definitely. We have to remember that it's not just about cutting property taxes. We have to think about what these taxes actually are going to do, or used to do. And so property taxes are a primary way of funding our public education, our public schools. And then if we get rid of the property tax or eliminate it, we have to make up that money somewhere, somehow. And that was really what Democrats were saying all session long. If you're going to make a cut, please explain to us, please explain to the Georgia voters and Georgia residents where that money, the additional money, is going to come from.
Greg, what are you hearing from Democrats now that this is law? How does that work? How do they navigate this, especially in an election year?
Yeah, I mean, look, affordability was the big buzzword going into the session, and affordability, this session reminds us, is in the eye of the beholder. To Republicans, that meant these property tax overhauls, income tax slashing. To Democrats, it means something very different. It means expanding Medicaid. It means more targeted pushes to cut back on taxes for teachers, public service employees, others, and of course, it also means more affordable housing, dipping into the surplus for child care benefits, that sort of thing. So Democrats leave the session just basically with their own narrative saying that if we were in charge, this is what we would do.
And you said the word narrative. I thought it was interesting what Mr. Jones was saying to you, Zach, establishing a narrative. Also, I should correct myself, it's not law yet. Yeah. It still has to be signed by Governor Kemp.
He's got quite a bit of reading to do on his desk, no doubt.
Yeah.
One thing that is still unsettled business, guys, and we've got about 90 seconds, but let's speed through this because it's important. The election bills. Lots of them, lots of proposals, and unsettled business right now. Let's just go down the line. Fred, how likely is it that the Georgia legislature has to go back in session before July 1st to get this all sorted out?
I think it looks like with respect to the QR code issue, that is something they're going to have to address to deal with what happened last year. So.
It's going to have to be addressed. I mean, when you look at the clear reading and language, something's got to be done. Is it going to happen before the primary and keep some of these folks from fundraising for another chunk of time before they go out onto the ballot? I'd be really surprised to see that happen. I don't know. I've seen stranger things this year, though.
We've been seeing a lot of strange things in Georgia politics for a number of years now. Greg, let's land the plane here with you. Where does this debate land, and what's the resolution that is most likely to be reached, if there is even one to be reached before the deadline?
Looks like either a court settlement or a special session, and I'll tell you, legislative leaders don't like the idea of either of those things right now.
We're going to find out, though, and the clock is ticking. We're just a couple weeks at this point. I mean, 6, 7, 8 until this happens. That's it for the panel right now. We're going to go a quick break. Much more on the other side of the break. We'll be right back. Tuesday is Election Day in the race to replace former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Two men, Republican Clay Fuller and Democrat Sean Harris, are in the special election runoff to fill the remainder of her term that opened up after she resigned from Congress earlier this year. We invited both of those candidates for interviews. Only Harris accepted. We talked on Monday when he shared his views on immigration, cost of living, and the war in Iran.
You know, I spent 40 years in the military. I understand it. I've lived it. I've led men and women on the battlefield. The reality of it is, this is a war of choice. My last assignment was Israel. This is a war of choice. And what concerns me as I'm talking to you right now today is by the end of this week, or by the time we actually get to the election day on the 7th, will we actually have boots on the ground? And when we put boots on the ground, you're taking it from a guy that's a combat infantry officer. Our men and women will get injured and killed, unfortunately. That would not be an easy fight, and that's why I need to be in Washington, D.C. to push back on this, because at the end of the day, President Trump promised us that he would never get us back into war, and right now I think we're on a slippery slope of getting into another forever war.
If you are elected, you do go to Congress. What do you think Congress's role should be for those in Congress who would share your position of wanting to push back against this war?
The reality of it is, Congress needs to stand up and get a backbone. That's Democrats and Republicans. Too many of those individuals just proved that the other day. Everybody, as I'm speaking to you, everybody from Congress is actually at home for the next 2 weeks.
And people are worried about how much things cost right now. If you go to Congress, what do you do to make life more affordable?
The reality of it, as soon as I get there, I'm going to be working every day to bring down the cost, because that cost right now is extremely high because of tariffs, but because we're in a war of choice. So what's killing most people right now in Northwest Georgia is every time they go to the pump. The day when I drove to you, I wanted to see you, but it hurt when I put that diesel in that truck to come up here to Atlanta today, because even though our governor has taken the tax off, diesel is still costing $4.99. That's without the tax. And if you put on top of that all the other costs that we have, that is why I want to go to D.C. One, to get us out of this war. That would bring down costs. But then on top of that, to work with others across the aisle to say, okay, what is affecting other rural communities? When it comes to health care, when it comes to everything across the board, what can we do to agree on some things to bring that cost down?
What policies coming out of the White House right now are you supportive of, and which ones give you cause for concern?
Yeah, one that's coming out of the White House right now that I support 100% is what he's done on the southern border. The southern border is closed down. We got that figured out. However, another area that we need to work on, and he got to get it figured out, and he would even tell you this, is what we're actually doing with ICE right now in the United States. President Trump said he was going to go out and get the worst of the worst. I agree with that. Rapists, the whole 9 yards, murderers, get them all. But what we have seen thus far is that ICE is well outside of their mission set. Why can I say that? It's because I used to work in the federal government. I have worked with ICE. I have worked with the FBI. I have worked with the Border Patrol, worked with everybody. Everybody needs to perform their roles, and the ICE should not be in our major cities. They should be picking up the worst of the worst, and when they pick them up, they're supposed to pick them up from the jail. They don't supposed to be out blocking roads and doing those things. And worst of all, you know when you're doing something wrong when you kill 2 Americans.
That is only part of our conversation. I also asked Harris about his views on abortion. You can see that and the rest of our full interview streaming right now on 11 Alive Plus. We also reached out to Clay Fuller's campaign repeatedly to give him the same chance to talk to our audience right here on the Georgia Vote. We extended multiple interview invitations to him. He never agreed to one. He did post this video on X on Thursday, though, asking supporters to head to the polls.
Hey guys, this is Clay Fuller, and I need you to stop the radical left by heading out and voting. You have 2 opportunities. Today, Thursday, April 2nd, this is the last day of early voting, so get out there. You've got a couple more hours. Make sure you're getting to your polling station, making your voice heard, making sure we are stopping the radical left. And if you don't get it done this afternoon on Thursday, the next opportunity is Tuesday, April 7th.
So we're back now with our panel. This has been a closely watched election. All 4 of us have been talking about this and been up in the northwest Georgia corner of the 14th district. A lot of spotlight here. What's the state of play, Greg? And is this a seat, it's historically a conservative one, is this a seat that Democrats have a legitimate chance of flipping?
Yeah, it's like walking the tightest of tight ropes right now for Democrats. Look, I mean, the numbers don't lie. Democrats maybe garnered about 40% of the vote, all told, with the 3 candidates in that special election a few weeks ago. That set the all-time high for Democrats in that district. That shows you how far they have to go, because no longer are they facing a fractured Republican field. Clay Fuller is the Trump-backed candidate, so he is the heavy favorite. Sean Harris knows that. He is trying to build a coalition of not just Democrats, because you can't win alone with Democrats, but also independents and disgusted Republicans. It's not easy to do in that 14th district.
And Greg, you spoke with him not long ago, and I believe you made a little bit of news in your interview because you said Marjorie Taylor Greene had not endorsed him. And I believe at this point she still has not. Joshua, I want to bring you in here. Joshua.
I've been called worse.
What does that speak to this, that she has kind of kept herself out of this race?
You know, from day one, I think Marjorie has made it clear she was not going to back anyone in the race if anyone said that they had her support. That wasn't going to be accurate, because there's a lot of people jockeying for how close they were to the outgoing congresswoman. So I'm not surprised she's stayed out of it, even in the runoff, especially when I think the defining feature of Clay's campaign is I'm endorsed by President Trump, and I think there's a large influence of the Trump fracture being why Marjorie left office in the first place. So I'm not shocked by it. You know, the 14th is kind of well known for its fractured intra-party politics. So, you know, people being upset about one person not doing this enough, or, you know, folks from the special not jumping in for the runoff and still being on the ballot for the general, it's kind of to be expected in that neck of the woods, if we're totally honest. But like Greg said, I think the numbers are all still there for Clay. This is not going to be a shocker on Tuesday night, in my opinion.
Fred, I've seen some knowing nods from you throughout this conversation here. Weigh in here. Share your thoughts.
I think for Democrats, it's about progress as opposed to the outcome. As both gentlemen mentioned, this is going to be a really tough race for Sean Harris to win. But if you can crest 40%, 42, 44%, and we can see progress in this, then that will give us a lot of hope, not necessarily to win the 14th, but for it to serve as a harbinger for the November elections when we're talking about the Senate, the governor's race, and other statewide elections. If that Republican base is weakening in the 14th, then that's a great sign for Democrats statewide.
I was going to say, the Democrats' campaigns all looking at this race, and not only this one, but these same candidates. I mean, Colton Moore already said that he is not done yet. He's ready to go ahead and put his hat in the ring for this primary that's coming up on the 19th, Greg.
Yeah, this is the second of what is expected to be 5 separate elections for the seat, to fill the remainder of Marjorie Taylor Greene's unexpired term this year, and of course, the next 2 years. This also gives us a window to how voters are viewing the Iran war, because these are 2 military veterans, a retired U.S. Army officer in Sean Harris, and of course a military veteran in Clay Fuller, and they both have very different views on the war. As you heard, Sean Harris is critical, and Clay Fuller is completely behind Donald Trump and believes in this war effort.
And Joshua, we heard Fred talking about how this is viewed in some ways as a little bit of a harbinger perhaps of what the electorate may be thinking ahead of the midterms that are coming our way. Are Republicans looking at this race in a similar way, maybe a chance to read some of the electoral tea leaves ahead of the May primaries and the November general?
To an extent, I think when you look at races like this and like Jason Dickerson in Senate District 21 late last summer into the fall, you see these overperformance numbers for Democrats in the first round, and you see heavy turnout, and it builds this narrative on one side of the coin that, look, Democrats are gaining ground in these areas. But on the other side of the coin, it also serves to underline the point that even when every single element and every factor is in your favor, Democrats still can't get across the finish line in some of these races.
5 seconds, Fred. You get a 5-second rebuttal to that, and then we go to break.
Well, I guess it all comes down to what you define as the finish line. We're looking towards November. That's the big goal.
That was good. That was 5 seconds. And we're going to find out what happens in November in just a few months. We'll be right back after this. Victims of an alleged Ponzi scheme could soon get their money back.
That's right. Georgia's Secretary of State says Bankers Life agreed to return $6.7 million to people who say they were misled by a former financial advisor. Well, this all ties back to First Liberty Building and Loan, which is accused of defrauding hundreds of investors. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger says that Timothy Nathaniel Darnell helped draw 46 investors into this scheme. Most of these investors were seniors. Well, he says that the state's investigation isn't over.
They're really, following the money trail, but it's very complicated. The record keeping wasn't too strong on First Liberty's part. But they're really diligently doing it.
Raffensperger's office has already issued 3 $500,000 fines to people accused in this scheme and referred them to possible criminal charges.
Stay with us, our voice of the voter, and a final word coming up after this.
Well, this election season, it is crucial to hear from as many of you as possible, because after all, you can't have the Georgia vote without Georgia voters, right? Well, each week, our Voice of the Voter takes us to communities across the state. And this morning, we head to Fayetteville to hear from Dr. Sonia Lewis and what she's watching closely.
My name is Dr. Sonia Lewis, and I'm based right here in Georgia. I am CEO of the Student Loan Doctor, America's Student Loan Expert. My pressing concern for the people of Georgia are their finances. As I think about what's happening with the student loan debt and how you're having to make a choice between making a huge student loan payment in everyday life, gas prices are up, cost of living is up. That really concerns me most. But what I am hopeful about is that there are opportunities, programs, and resources that I just need the people of Georgia to know about. A lot of people, such as our teachers and our public service workers, and even our entrepreneurs, they just don't understand how student loans work and how to take advantage of these things. And so what I'm most hopeful about is that Georgia residents can be educated so that they can get through these financial concerns and have a better life to strive with their finances.
Our thanks to Dr. Lewis. Hey, affordability, you hear it right there. People are worried about the money in their pockets.
And you know what? The politicians are watching as well, just like you are. And we are thankful that you are with us in this very busy year of Georgia politics.
That's right. Thank you so much for joining us this holiday weekend. We hope to see you back here next Sunday for another edition of the Georgia Vote.